Well, hello, welcome to another one of our little parlor sessions here at the museum. We're here with some people that live in Mesquite, have lived here for many years, and they're going to tell you who they are and some recollections they have of the old Relief Society building. And so we'll start the introductions around, they'll tell you who they are and who their parents are and something just about their growing up here.
I'm Orpha Woods Ruth. I'm the daughter of Fred and Orpha Hardy Woods. Orpha's parents was Charles Milton and Hardy and Emma Marina Levitt Hardy. I don't have much recollection as a Relief Society house as the Relief Society house, but I was baptized there on February 4th, 1951 by my brother Crescent, and I was confirmed by our bishop, G. Morris Rowley, at that time.
I'm Margaret Hardy, and I was born here in 1911, lived here all my life. And I remember the old Relief Society house, and I would happen to be Relief Society president when they enlarged it from a real small building to the size it is now. Well, Margaret Pulsifer, Maggie Pulsifer, was president at the time that they started to enlarge it, and then I was president after her. And we finished it up. There was a kitchen, there was a baptismal font, and a kitchen, and then the big room. We had many banquets and dinners there. And it was used for many purposes. We put quilts, we cut on Relief Society Day, on work day, we cut rags and sewed them and made rugs, made crocheted rugs and quilts, and we worked. We all worked. I remember at one time, one Relief Society Day, we had 4 quilts on in town, in different places. It was hot, and we had to quilt outside, and so they just put one in every neighborhood, and the sisters in that neighborhood would go there and quilt, but we had a good time.
I'm Melvin Hughes, son of Leonard and Cheryl Hughes. Leonard was born here in Mesquite in 1910, and his father moved here when he was a young man of 14 and was married and lived here all of his life. And I was born in 1934, and I've lived here all of my life. So, about the old Relief Society building, I can remember when they were building it. I think Uncle Walt Hughes was the carpenter, the head carpenter that was the builder, that is, that kind of overseed the building. They had a lot of help building from the townspeople. But one of the things that I remember before the building was dedicated, there was 3 of us that was baptized there in 1941. November the 1st in 1942, I'm sorry, November the 1st in 1942. There was myself, Kent Hardy, and Sharon Reber. And we were baptized there before it was dedicated. And I have many memories of the old building, of going with Mother there. Of course, usually they didn't want the kids running around too much, disturbing, but it seemed that someone always had a kid or 2 there and helping. But over the years, why, It was used as the Relief Society building for a lot of years, as Margaret says, a lot of activities. I remember a lot of dinners that we went and had there over the years. A lot of get-togethers. I even remember a dance or two. Of course, I was a little young, didn't dance then, but a lot of the people did dance. So it was used for a lot of the outings. And then in 1952, then the church was, the original church was built and dedicated. Before that, they rented the schoolhouse, and of course a lot of dances and outings was held in the schoolhouse through the church.
Okay, could you tell us a little bit about the family that moved in there after the Relief Society house was closed? Any of you?
The Wesley Hughes family bought it and remodeled it, you know, put partitions in and made rooms, and they lived there, I guess, most of the time that the family was growing up. And it made, you know, quite a nice home for them, because they partitioned it off and had bedrooms and the living room. But really the only room I was in was the living room when they lived there, but they lived there for, I guess, raised most of their family right there.
Do you have me shaved?
I did.
Well, we're glad to welcome someone new here. Would you like to introduce yourself for the record and tell us about your parents?
Yes, I'm Eugene Hughes, a cousin to Melvin, and related to everybody here. My parents were Marion Hughes and Eugenia Bernice Hawkins, and we lived here in Mesquite all our lives.
And let me say something about him. He was the best boy in town. He was such a good boy. I just always looked up to him.
I had a few fooled, didn't I?
I didn't ever know anything that he did that was wrong.
I could tell a few stories on his younger brother, though.
Yes, I could too. But not Eugene.
What was his younger brother's name?
Gary Hughes.
Gary was a good boy too.
Gary was a good boy, but him and Art Hughes, and Art was the son of Wesley Hughes, who lived in the home, and Art grew up in the home, but, or not Art, I'm sorry, it was Tom Hughes. I'll get my thinking cap on. It was Tom Hughes, and Tom and Gary were both the same age, and one boy couldn't think of why the other one did, but maybe those stories will be better told another.
What are some of those stories? That's what we'd like to hear about.
Now, you were baptized there. You could tell us that story.
Yes. I don't remember much. I do remember I was baptized in the old Relief Society building, along with 5 or 6 others. And I was baptized by Asel Barnum, who is an uncle to the Asel that's here now, Asel Barnum. I believe he was an uncle. And there was they did it for convenience at the time. I always wondered why I was baptized in August instead of April, when my birthday was, but they just did it for convenience, I found out. They did a group of us at the same time, and I'm sure they've talked about the font. The font was in the back of the Relief Society building. The Relief Society building, I remember thinking about it after Sister Montgomery mentioned it to me, that there was where the living room was for Wes was a kind of a meeting area with chairs. I remember a lot of chairs being in there. Other than that, I can't remember much about it except playing around it, and, you know, there to the old Elwood Theater next to it, and stuff like that. I always remember there was a cement slab on the north. Usually there was a wagon there, but I think that wagon came later. If I remember right, Wes put that wagon.
Wes put the wagon there.
Yeah.
The cement slab that Eugene is talking about was where James Hughes had his original store in town. And that was just north of the old building. But
Now, do any of you remember the store? Was that store there when?
No.
I'm sure Margaret remembers this store. But I do not. When I came and was old enough, then the store was where the, the casino, what is it?
Golden
Golden
West.
West.
Golden West Casino is now, and that was the old store. Original was on that,
And post office.
on,
they
and
moved
post
down there
office and
after.
that.
But the first one was right there.
Yeah.
Then the post office, of course, was moved west of the store, out of the store and west of the store, and had its own building later. But I do not remember of when the store was up there on that lot. But that's where it originally
I
was.
remember it very well. They had everything. I remember Uncle Jimmy saying, well, if it isn't here, if I don't have it now, I soon will, because it's on its way. It was ordered. But everything was done with teams then, team and horses, and everything was brought in by wagon.
Or from when you were little in the late 1940s, what was life like here in Mesquite?
Trouble. What?
I didn't come to school here until 1950.
Okay.
Actually, I came in the 3rd grade, and my mom was from here, but she married my dad who was out to Clover Valley. We lived on a ranch out there. And then when my sister got old enough to come to high school, we came down here for her to go to high school. I attended the first half of the school year in the 3rd grade here, and then went home during the spring of that year and attended the last school that we had, the last of the schooling we had out home.
And what were the teachers' names that you remember?
There was a Benson, a Paxman, a Raines, G. Morris Rowley, who was the bishop at the time as well, and the sister that taught with G. Morris Rowley half a year. Was it Christensen? I can't
There
remember.
was a Christensen.
That sounds familiar. I think,
Eileen Christensen?
Christensen.
I
Yes.
think
There
it was
was
her
an
name.
That's right.
Eileen Christensen.
I think it was her that,
and I think
that taught half the year.
Desi worked with him a little bit as well, if I remember right.
I think that was after I was out of the 6th grade. He was principal of the school, and so he taught half the day, and the woman taught the other half. And I think that was Eileen Christensen. Then, of course, we went to Bunkerville after that for school.
What kind of entertainment was around in 1950 around here, besides the theater?
Horses, graveyard.
Graveyard.
We played hide and seek in the graveyard.
In the swimming hole, where did we go swimming?
Yeah, there was a swimming hole, a big ditch. There was, we call it the sand gates.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different spots that.
Charlo.
Charlo was, yeah.
The Rod, up at Rod's, and Charlo Hole, and the Sand Gate. They had the upper Sand Gate, the middle Sand Gate, and the lower Sand Gate.
And we used to call
We
it,
used to-
The one above our house, was that the middle sand gate?
we used to
was the
call it,
middle one.
and then we call it the Lynch, same gate as
The
well.
Lynch Sand Gate, and
That's
that
where
was,
we spent most of our swimming time.
was at the Lynch
And then,
Sand
of course,
Gate.
there was another one across the river on the Bunkerville side.
Then we, of course, always, every time there was a flood, why, we always went down to the river, and that old red slick mud
Right away.
would pile up on the sand, and we would slide, belly flop and slide, and of course Eugene mentioned riding waves, and I don't know whether our parents worried about us in the floods or not, but every time there was a flood, why, we were always down there, and we'd find an area that was real good that had a lot of waves, and then we would ride the waves down the stream for maybe a quarter of a mile or a half mile, and then trudge back up and then ride the waves down again. And that was a lot of fun. In fact, my younger brother used to do that, and he got his nickname Lizard. As we were walking back up one time, why, of course, the water was cold and it was a little chilly, and we loved to get down in the sand and pull the sand all up over us and around us, the old hot sand. And anyway, my kid brother, he dove in the sand and started to put the hot sand all over his body, and as his cousin was walking along with him, he seen him down doing that, and he says, "Well, get up, you shouldn't swear, but D-A-M, sand lizard, and let's go." Well, that finally got shortened to Lizard, and to this day I still call him Lizard. So
Our parents usually didn't know that we were swimming until we got home and our undergarments were always red. Then they found out.
And up where the Virgin River is now, the Virgin River Casino, there was a hill we called the Pinnacle, and we'd go up and slide down that. We had pieces of tin and a car hood. We'd work and work and work to get that car hood just for the ride down the hill. And of course, another thing a lot of us did, sometimes we were on horses, sometimes we were on foot, but we'd go straight up the wash from there, and we'd put potatoes. We'd build a bonfire and throw potatoes in it, and of course they'd be burnt black as ace of spades, but gee, they were good after you'd been out there playing in the sand hills.
In Bunkerville, I heard they would steal watermelons and chickens, and it was kind of a tradition.
Well,
They wouldn't do anything.
What did they do over here?
we didn't steal over here. We
Borrowed, okay.
Borrowed. We borrowed, and
I'm sorry, I misused the word.
I've had many chicken supper with my neighbors, borrowed chickens and watermelons as well. And Arfa was talking about the Pinnacle, and let me tell you about another thing, and that was the Garrett Trail.
Oh, yes.
The Garrett Trail came off from the hill behind the casino, and it was probably run down along the edge of the hill. Just I'll bet it could have been what, not 3/4, maybe a half of a mile, the trail. But we used to, as kids, we'd say, "Let's go run the Garrett Trail," and we would start on the Pinnacle. We would run up the Garrett Trail, and then we would come down, and there was a big rock of flint right where the highway comes by, and I and my boy, one of these days, we're going to go look and see if we can find that rock of flint. But I remember that it was big that a man could not lift it, but we used to go down, we called it Flint Canyon, and then the trail went on up out of there and over into what we called Keeley's Castle, and Keeley's Castle was just a trail under the bank that the kids had kind of fashioned a place that we could sit in there in the shade and rest, and that was Keeley's Castle. And then we went from there on over to a knoll that we called the Sugarloaf. And so anytime you run the Garrett Trail, why, of course, you run the Pinnacle, the Garrett Trail, the Flint Canyon, Keeley's Castle, and then on the Sugarloaf. But
With all the grading over there, is any of that still where you could see it?
I have an idea. Some of the Garrett Trail might still be there.
I don't think it is.
It's pretty well gone.
Is
The
it?
apartments
I
are on
think
the
it's
hill,
gone.
and it's pretty well gone. I think it's been pretty well excavated.
I think it's
There.
Arfa-
I haven't been there for years, so
Arfa mentioned about sliding down the hills in the car hoods. We had a modern way. We would slide down the old Lynch Hill, and then we'd hook them onto DeMar's Model A and pull it up around and slide down again. It was an old airport on that hill. And he'd just come down off the hill with his Model A, but we just did that over and over again. We used to, as far as playing, we used to play bike tag at night. I don't know whether you got involved in that or not.
not much.
You
I was
would-
usually working nights.
all over town. We'd play bike tag, we'd just go along and we'd try to tap the back wheel with our front wheel. Of course, we had a lot of wrecks. and of course, kick the can and stuff like that was prevalent.
One of the things that I remember down in the other end of town by Johnny Jensen's field, he had a big, probably a 10-acre field there, and there was a lot of mesquite trees in it, just a pasture that he pastured these horses in. But we would build up a big bonfire in there, and then play Run Sheep Run and Woolly and all of those fun games. A lot of till way late at night, but there was always a lot to do.
On the farm we had an interesting game. I wouldn't call it by its name, it would be misinterpreted. But we used elastic bands, and we'd take and cut old tire tubes and tie them, and use gunny sacks for shields, and you know, we'd divide up into sides and go, and it'd be like a war.
It was a war.
That's where I got my name.
We made the wooden pistol.
Yeah. Wood and also.
Rubber band gun.
Yeah.
Rubber
But
band.
we usually just used our fingers and slung it that way.
Yeah.
Did that an awful lot. We spent a lot of time in the water because it was hot. You know, in the canals.
Your parents didn't have you working a lot?
Oh,
We
yeah.
did.
But
We worked.
a lot of the work was done at night
We worked.
in the summertime.
A lot of the work, well, all day, most of the night.
Nora told me they did a lot of the work in the fields, especially on a full moon night,
Yeah.
because it's so hot during the day.
They always, oh, yeah. One of the things, Granddad had a contract to with to raise seed for sugar beets. They would raise the seed here in the valley, and then they would take it up to the Sugar Beet Association. They had a warehouse there in St. George. They'd take the seed up there and then process it and then ship it up north into northern Utah and Idaho, and then they would grow the regular beets and use them for sugar. But the seed, a lot of it was raised here. But anyway, and that was one of the things that we always got up early of a morning, get up long about 1, 2 o'clock and get the team harnessed. We had an old mowing machine with a tin slip behind, and somebody usually walked along behind, and as the beet seed fell onto the tin, why the man that was walking behind would just let it gather there until there was so much there, and then he would put his pitchfork and drag it off. And then all around the field, why they had men and boys stationed at to move them piles back over about 6-8 foot, so as the team could make another run around the field, and all day long, that is all morning long, until it got 9, 10 o'clock, till it started to get too hot for the horses. Why, we would cut a lot of beet seed. But we always put those in rows. We'd put them in 4 rows, and then we'd leave a 10-foot space or 12-foot space, and then we put them in 4 more rows, and that was so as that they could drive a team or a slip, and this is what they used to have, is a slip.
Or sleds, basically, right?
Well, it was a sled. It was 2 runners. It was about 8 foot wide and 20 foot long. Had a team of horses on it, and it would go down between those rows of seed, and then they would pile the seed on the slip, and they always had to pile the hay seed, or the beet seed. They always had to pile it one way, so as when you pulled it into the thrashing machine, why it all came off the same way. The heads was all facing one way, and they could do it. But we worked hard as kids. We did. We worked hard. All of the kids had their jobs, their chores, but we found time for have a lot of fun, and it was enjoyable growing up here in the valley. I just really had a good time. An interesting thing happened to I and my sister. My father, when I was about 8 years old, 7 or 8, bought a home from Anthony Abbott, or Tony Abbott, and it was just a little 2-room home with a kind of a big room that we used as the bedroom and living room, and then he had a little kitchen off to the side. But anyway, I and my sister, who was a couple of years younger than I were, we were out digging in the yard as kids do, and we come across what looked like a nickel. It was the same size and shape as a nickel. But we got looking at it and polished it up a little, and it said Anthony Nickel, or Abbott Nickel, I'm sorry. It was Abbott Nickel. But Anthony owned this, where the art gallery is now, he owned that building, and that was a motel, or a hotel, and a store, and he had those nickels processed, and he would give them to the local townspeople for change. But anyway, that spurred I and my sister's interest in digging for more nickels of the Anthony nickels, and through the course of the summer we had a hole probably 2 or 3 foot deep, and maybe 8 or 10 foot square. But we found probably one of these old bank bags, about yay high and yay wide, a canvas bank bag. We found enough of those old nickels to fill one of them.
Do you have any left?
I just asked at the museum, and they do not, and I do not. I have no idea where they went over the years. I will tell you that my father was president of the Young Men, the Mutual Improvement Association, and they had a jukebox, and any time they wanted to dance, my father would use the nickels and put them in the old jukebox, and then of course play the records, and kids would get out and dance, and it was enjoyable. But those nickels was used in that jukebox for a lot of years. Now, Brother Montgomery, if you could find the jukebox, I'm sure you might find a nickel or two. But other than that, I have no idea. I've thought about that a lot, of why we just didn't keep track of something like that, but we did not.
Do you remember that, Margaret? Do you remember it?
Yes.
The nickels? The nickels?
We had those old jukeboxes, that's where we danced.
So, what about the nickels? You remember the nickels?
Oh, the nickels, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen them.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to the Relief Society building, besides being baptized there, what other activities did any of you go to there? Or were the kids just not there much?
It was mainly used for the women.
Well, other than a party or two, a social, they did have socials there, but not too many. It just was not big enough that the whole town could get there. And
most of our activities were in the old school building, where we held church, and also the gymnasium.
But I remember having dinners there.
Yes, and I went to a few dinners in the old
Society
building. Yeah.
room.
But I cannot.
They put on lots of quilts. I remember going in there, and they had 3 or 4 quilts on.
I don't know where it came from, but it was a whole load of old clothes that they said they came from Hollywood, but anyway, the Relief Society, that was our job, was to cut them up and make quilt blocks or rugs or whatever we could. And this Frances Harper laid her coat over the back of the seat. Somebody had it and was cutting all the buttons off her coat. She said, "Oh, that's my coat. You've cut all the buttons off from it."
I remember those buildings were awful warm. You know,
We
they
had-
would
They
get
were
hot,
warm.
get hot, I remember
They were
that.
warm.
Yeah.
We made those plaster Paris plaques, you know, and that was one of our projects in Relief Society, and we had Zelda Hughes lived right next door, and we needed flour, so she went over and got a bag of flour. We didn't use it, so I said, "Well, you just well take that home." So she did. She said she made her bread and it just come up so light and pretty, and put it in the oven. When she opened the oven, it was just like a brick. And she had used this plaster Paris instead of the flour.
Do you remember the old flour mill in town?
Oh, yes.
You tell us what you remember about the old mill.
Well, I remember going there and you know, to pick up bran when my father had interest in it, in the mill, and we'd go there, you know, it kind of separates, the bran goes, and I remember going to the old mill and gathering up bran and putting in a sack
Where was
to
it?
take home. It was right on the corner, you know, as you come around, well, from the ranch, what used to be the Sylvester Ranch, you know, or the Bowler Ranch. Bowlers had it after we did. The point there, as you come around.
Right there.
And
Just
Okay, just
on
about
the other
there.
side of Tillman's home is
Yeah.
where the old mill was.
It was,
and
it was
the reason-
a round building,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yes, it was still there when I was here in
And the
school.
reason they had it there is close to the big ditch, and they turned the water out of the big ditch, and that run the mill, the water running, then they had the big wheel that they run the mill with, and I think it only lasted, what, 2 or 3 years, and it burnt down, it seemed
Yeah.
like, and
The
they
adult-
never,
Really
The
had
adult
good-
building was still there when I was in the 5th or
But-
6th grade, because we took a trip up as a school and went to
then
it,
seen it.
yeah.
But I know it made very good flour. We could go to St. George and anyone would trade us, if we had to borrow a sack of flour, they're always anxious to get this peacock. It was Arizona Peacock was the brand. And they were always happy to get a sack of that because it was very good flour.
I can remember of having underwear
Yeah.
made
Made
out
out
of
of,
the
yeah.
peacock
Put
flower
the
sacks.
peacock on the back side.
Yeah, it was hard to watch the
Yeah.
patterns all.
Well, as we wrap up our little talk, we just like to give each of you a chance to just tell us about some childhood memories or anything else that really means a lot to growing up in Mesquite.
You start off with you start. Let me think about a few things.
Well, that's my problem, is trying to think about it for a few minutes. Well, like I say, I was in the 3rd grade when we came here to Mesquite. I came from a little valley where there was 3 girls, me, my sister Monta, and our cousin Morba. Maybe up the track there was another 2 girls, but everyone else was boys. When I came here, it was really so nice to have girls my age to be around. But it was hard because I was a tomboy, and I like to ride horses, and that is one of the things that kept me going from missing my own home country at Barkley, is being able to get on my old red mare and run up and down the streets and the roads with some of the other kids that had the animals as well. I couldn't pick a particular favorite memory. My my growing up years here was just fabulous. If the children now could have the fun that I had as a child here, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. They wouldn't be sitting in front of a television. They wouldn't be sitting in front of a video box or what are these Game Boys that they all play now. And they wouldn't be tapping on a cell phone to text everyone with. We worked hard. I started working at Vonda's Cafe. Vonda was my aunt when I was 11 years old as a waitress. And I worked there for most of my years. And then I went to work at Faye's Cafe. I think I was in maybe the 9th or 10th grade at that time. And worked there till I was out of school. But we had fun. We had chicken suppers. And sometimes the chickens just didn't come from the icebox. Because I'd been raised on the ranch, it was my job to clean the chicken. And oh, I was so glad when Virginia and Horace moved here. And one night I said, I'm not cleaning any chickens. And Philo, their son, said, well, I know where some is. And he went to his mother's deep freeze and brought out the chicken. That's the last chicken I ever had to clean.
Was that Philo?
That was Philo Silvestri,
Yeah.
yes. I was trying to think of something a while ago that was interesting, and it keeps slipping back and forth in my mind. Maybe I'll remember it later.
Well, one thing that I remember is the old grape farm. You know, there was about 40 acres of grapes, and we all worked there in the summertime and dried them. Of course, they had to be watched and covered if it rained, and it was quite a process. But then they were, and I think the old stemmer is out here in the museum. They would run them through that, and the raisins would fall down and the stems would go off, and boxed them in 20-pound boxes, and they sold a lot of raisins from here, from that grape farm. It was quite an industry.
In fact, the old grapes, they entered the grapes in the World's Fair in San Francisco in 1912, and they took first place for the type of grape that was there. So, but there was a lot of grapes in the valley. I remember of going the grapes that out in the brush, and you had to paw your way back in, and you had to beat the birds to them, but they were sure good grapes over the years. But one of the things I remember about as a kid, it seemed like we always worked hard to make fun. One thing, why, in these sloughs, bulrushes, why, there was a lot of them on the south end of town and south of town, and us kids would get out there, and when the cattails would come up, why, we'd break the cattails and make a big line of the trailings up a couple of 100 feet, and then we always struck a match and set it afire, and it took about 10 or 15 minutes for that to burn to get started into the slough. And as soon as we struck the match, we all jumped on our horses and come uptown and made sure that somebody seen us, and we was mingling around town here, and all of a sudden we looked down, and the whole southern end of town was on fire there, where we'd said, oh look, somebody's setting the slough on fire. I don't know whether they ever did figure we'd done it or not, but in the first valley, when they come in, lumber was scarce. They had to haul it a long way, and one of the things that they did was they made block, adobe block. And I remember over where the Maverick Station is now on the north end of that yard or lot, they had a pit. It was probably 6 7 feet wide and maybe 4 or 5 feet deep, and they had a pole down in the bottom of a box with cross things that went around, and then they had to come up and as a kid, why, that was my job, is I had to ride the horse around and around and around. And then they would unhook the horse off from the pole, and then the man would get down in after the dope got mixed up, would shovel it into their molds. And on that whole lot where the Maverick station is, why, that used to be one giant adobe out there baking in the sun and getting dry. But there was a lot of homes built in the valley out of that adobe, and I guess they hauled the clay in, as I remember. They hauled it in and put it into the pit, and then added water, and I don't remember them using straw, but I remember seeing the show, the 10 Commandments, about when the children of Israel was in Egypt, they had to have straw in their brick, but I don't ever remember of them putting straw in their brick, and yet some of those old brick are still, I could go show you 4 or 5 homes right today that was built out of those bricks.
We had a adobe mill right in our backyard, and the canal used to run through there, so it was clay. And we made all the adobes for our house that we built right there in our own backyard. Had the molds and put them in, and they'd have to turn them, but we made all the adobes for the home that we built right there in the yard.
That's what Grandpa Charles Milton Hardy did as well. He made his home out of the
out of adobe.
Plus Uncle Edgar and him did them for Uncle Edgar's home. And when he was building the adobe for his home, he also built the adobe for the Woodbury home, just over where, what is that called? Just cat a corner.
Where Prudential Life
Yeah,
used
where
to be.
Prudential is now,
I think.
that little.
Right there.
Yeah.
Well,
But we did have fun growing up here. Gosh, I could tell so darn many stories about growing up in the valley that be here all day, and I'm sure you've heard from me enough, but it was fun. We worked hard, we played hard, and it was just an enjoyable life. Always had a lot of friends, and what one couldn't think to do, why, the other one would.
And you went barefooted because you had to. You didn't.
Oh, yes.
We didn't have shoes. You
But
got
all
one
of
pair of
us did
shoes a
that.
year, and
you build up a
and
lot
you
of
wore them
calluses.
during school most of the time,
Church.
and in fact I missed out on painted hunting one year because I didn't have a pair of shoes to wear. Do you know that?
Is that right?
I fashioned me out some cardboard and put there and a string up over my foot. Yeah, I've got shoes, I can go. Well, they didn't let me go painted hunting that year. I was broken hearted about that. Gosh.
During the hottest part of the summer, we had run from one grass patch to another, so our feet wouldn't get too hot. But they were built up with a lot of calluses, and it was a wonderful place to grow up in. It was I think the thing that was unique is that wherever we went, I didn't spend much time in Aunt Margaret's home, but I think we spent time in every home in the valley. There was around 1,000 people there, and wherever you go, if you did something wrong, they would discipline you.
They would do
It didn't matter who it was or what, but.
And remember they called it the charlotte hole. We talked about that.
Yes.
And most of the families in town would be up there in the, late in the afternoon swimming.
I think the
watching
charlotte
kids
hole
swim.
is located just about where that parking garage is, next to those baseball fields,
Yeah.
about in that area.
Right in that area.
Because the canal has changed the
Yeah.
direction.
Canal
We used to,
change.
but everybody would be
Kind
up
of
there.
dug it out so that it was
Yeah.
quite deep.
That's where
Quite
a
a
lot
big-
of people were baptized.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot
Yeah.
of kids baptized in the ditch.
As related to the charter hole, you know, my mother come looking for me. I don't know how old I was. I was with these guys and real young, and she was always worried about the water. She come up there, and I was going up and down the ditch, and she never did worry about that anymore. But it's a wonderful, you know. It's like I say, it was an experience. For example, I used to spend a lot of time at Kenneth Revers, along with Marvin Pollock and then all these guys. But at Ken Rivers, I would go in, and Leonard River was always there, and he was so cordial to me. But when I would get out on the street and wave to him, he would never wave to me. I could never figure that out. But now I know he couldn't see, and I can't see that, so I don't wave either. But
Talking about Kenneth Rever, that remind me of a story, but it's not the kind to tell.
as a family, we used to. As a family, we used to work at night hauling hay.
That's
and
the
then-
stories we want.
I can tell it.
As a family, we'd work at night, and then during the day, their place had a swamp cooler, and so we would go up, and there'd be probably 20 guys in that one room, just laying on the bed and on the floor and trying to rest, you know, getting ready to go to night again, or to go milk. And it was just, I wish the kids nowadays, you know, had people looking out for them like we did.
Remember the old road shows we used to have?
Yeah.
And take it to Alamo or Overton and put on
Yeah.
a show and
Yeah.
Well, one of the stories you're talking about, Ken Rever and Larvin Houston. Did you remember that? How he got his name, Zipper?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't tell that.
No, you don't.
I don't
want to.
tell that one.
don't
I
tell
dare
that one.
tell
You
that
don't tell
one, but
You know, we was talking earlier about us being good kids and never stealing watermelons and things like that. But where your home is, there used to be a field right in that area, and in it was a big mulberry tree. And of
Oh, yeah.
course, we were renting what we called the old low plant place just below that field at the time. And I spent a lot of time in that tree when I wasn't in school or working. And one day, Clyde River was out, and he'd been planting the field, and he'd drop in watermelon seeds. One for me, two for the kids. One for me, two for the kids. I don't know if Clyde could see me up in that tree, but I kept really, really still. And I was just waiting for the melons to come up.
Now, that old mulberry tree,
Yeah.
it produced mulberries, and of course we would eat a lot, but we have also, it was bushy enough and big enough, and not as many limbs as you could play tag. You could actually
Yeah.
go around the tree without going to the ground.
We
And, you
played
know,
Tarzan in it all the time.
yeah.
hunt peach birds in there. The peach birds, the mulberries would get ripe, and of course we always had a flipper in our back pockets and a pocket full of rocks or two. But oh, that was fun under that mulberry tree. Yeah.
Well, we sure do thank you for this gathering, and this is the official end of the interview, but you're welcome to visit after we're done.
Thanks, Don.
So
Does it show my whiskers?
no, but it'll show mine.
It's just like coming out of the field, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was going to be on film.
Margaret, your place was right there where the garage net is now, wasn't it? Right down there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah. And we could go right down the road and tell where everybody lived in those days.
Oh,
Can't do that anymore.
I can still tell you where everybody used to live, so.
I think I could too. But you know, there was only about 60, at one time, when there was only about 60 families in town.
Yeah.
And I remember one year, almost every woman in town had a baby that year, and they were all girls. There was 20, I think it was 21 girls and 3 boys. That was when Emery was, born. But there was Sheldon Abbott, and Oscar Abbott had a boy.
Otis.
Otis.
And who was the
Otis
other
or
one?
Gerald?
Otis. It was Otis.
Otis.
Yeah.
And somebody else. I can't remember who the third
Oh,
one
let me
was.
think.
But they had all these girls, 20 girls, and just 3 boys.
Yeah, and our class was just the opposite. We had 12 and 6, I think, 12 and 6.
It was 33, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that's when Emery was born. It was,
Angie had Emerald. Was that who it was? He
You
might
see
have
that
been a
same
year
image?
older. He might have been a year older.
uh-huh.
So,
We used to walk that old fence right at Uncle Walt's there, you know, that pipe fence. Did you ever do
What?
that? We used to get on that and walk as far as we could on that pipe fence. Did you ever do that, Mom?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't.
Walt had a mulberry tree in behind
Remember
his,
that?
only
Yeah.
it was a white mulberry instead
When
of
they
a
oiled the
red.
sidewalks.
Yeah. Do you remember when they used to, of course, this was a little later, they used to take a spray for mosquitoes? That fog?
Mhm.
And the kids would run through that stuff? Now we know why we can't remember, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite the deal. You should have told them about the, you know, on the farm with the chariots.
Oh,
Did
yeah,
you read that?
well, we forgot about that. When the team was no longer needed for the farm, we built these, well, actually it was a
Take the front end of a wagon.
wagon or the back end and make
A tongue.
kind of a tongue out of it, or a double thing where we could put the
one
horse
horse.
inside
One
and,
horse, yeah.
and pull it, and then we'd build a seat on it, and we called that our chariot, and round town we went.
We went across the river and there was a kind of a flat area there.
Was you with us?
Yeah, I
It
was
was you
with
and
you.
DeMar, and you was with DeMar, and there was Ira and Myron.
And these guys were having chariot races over there, and if the folks knew that they were running those old work horses, they would kill them. Yeah.
But was it you with us?
Yeah, I was there, and there was also Floyd, you remember Floyd, was on the quarter horse.
Like Abbott.
No, it was, I don't remember who, he just moved in and moved out.
Oh.
Floyd, and I'm trying to remember who it is, because we have a 50th class reunion
I
next year.
remember the family.
And
I can't remember their name right now.
I can't remember either, Floyd
Mother
something.
was sick and
Yeah.
But anyway, I was gonna be smart, I and Myron, I was driving, and Myron, was you with him?
I was
think it-
on the quarter horse, and Floyd was on his seat with him.
Okay,
Yeah.
but anyway, they went in, and I was gonna be smart, and DeMar and them got to where they got their feet wet, and I and Punt was gonna be smart, and we was going out foxing, we was going downstream a little bit, to where we wouldn't get as wet as they did. We did. And we dropped all the heck that was floating as our hats.
We were watching, do you remember that time when it was flooding, and it really come up high? And we were walking out across the deal there, and Gabby, you know where the creek was? Gabby just disappeared. Her hands were sticking up, and all of a sudden he just went down. He
So
walked into,
you were up at this end of town?
yeah, where the old,
Where it used to
the old
come around
grove,
through.
the old grove of Black Rose and stuff.
Yeah.
And out across there, we're going across the creek. We didn't realize the creek was there, and he just went out of sight. And then, of course, it was red and muddy, and then we got up in the waves and rode those. But that was dangerous. You know, there was those old trees where it wasn't any dams or anything. Those old trees used to roll down through there.
Yeah.
You bring down that river, and it was extremely dangerous, but we didn't seem to bother us.
I don't think anybody ever got
I think
hurt.
the good Lord just took care of
Just
young
Took care
kids
of
and
the
darn
kids
fools.
and their stupid things, and the Lord took care of us.
Oh, yes.
Knew that we didn't have a better sense. So,
We used to-
well,
Well,
we used to play.
And Melvin, remember going to Salt Lake for the dance festivals?
oh
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
we did.
Yes.
Oh, I loved that. That was fun. You know
Yeah,
that.
That was enjoyable.
Oh, man, yeah, we practiced for a year, well, not a year, but for a long
Well, just about
time.
every mutual night.
And for a long time, we practiced, and then we'd go up, and how they ever got that coordinated with the whole church,
Yeah,
how they got that coordinated, but I guess from up in the bleachers, why, it looked impressive, so.
We
Yeah,
went
it
once
was.
to Vegas with the dance festival, didn't we?
We did, but I can remember going to Salt Lake practically every year too.
See, I didn't with those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the
the
road
old
shows, the road
Road
shows.
shows.
were fun.
Road show.
Yeah, we used to go to Alamo, we used to go to Overton and with road shows and just put them on, yeah. All around.
We were going to Alamo once for a road show, and Andy Wilson was supposed to go, and he crawled into the bar bed some way and cut his nose, and he didn't want to go. I said, Andy, you've got to go, you're on the program. And that's when he sang, Santa Got Stuck in the Chimney. He just stole the show, that was so good.
We were coming back from Alamo one time after a road show, and we were with Kent
Hardy.
Kent Hardy, in one of those Oldsmobiles, 98, Oldsmobile 98. And we were going along, and we were just starting to go to sleep down where those, where you're going through that cut. There used to be water in there, I think, if I remember right. But all of a sudden, he got on a straight stretch, and he just hit the brakes and skid. He says, "Oh no, I got him, and we come out. He come back, he says, "That poor little mosquito." we didn't sleep anymore, but he just slid down the floor.
I remember when we had we put on Little Abner.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
the Rever, what was his name?
Ken.
Ken Rever
Yeah.
was Abner, and
Probably Claire was probably the.
no, it was Suzanne White was
Was Daisy May?
Daisy?
Daisy May.
Daisy May.
Yeah, I would think it would be Claire because Claire your niece used to sing
Yes.
with me and Ken.
Well, yeah, Ken and Claire sang a lot.
They did.
Ken and
yeah.
Claire sang along, yeah. That's good. Well, fun to reminisce.
Yeah.
But I wish you could find some old Abbott Nichols for me. I'd like to see some of them.
We'll do some
You haven't
searching.
had that going, I hope.
Yep.
No.
Well, the Silver Dog